Thank you everyone for joining us for another session of Momentum Tea. We're once again at Temasek Shophouse, and today we're going to talk about trade-offs in public decisions. We're going to talk about why we do certain things and what do we have to give up, what do communities have to give up or come together to agree to move ahead with a particular policy. Before we go ahead, you might be wondering what these little brown balls are. These are air ionizers, and they're actually helping us to clean the air. They attract the dust and the viruses, and we have a very safe environment over here.
I see.
Yes. But before we go ahead, can I ask, maybe we just introduce our panelists for now. You can introduce yourselves. Maybe we start from Qian Qian.
Hi, I'm Qian Qian, and I'm studying political science at NUS.
Hi, I'm Lastrina Hamid. I'm co-founder of Singapore Youth for Climate Action.
Hi, I'm Dylan. I'm the co-founder of One Kind Blog, and I'm part of One Kind House. Currently unemployed and just having fun.
Hi, I'm Edwin. I'm the Minister for Culture, Community and Youth, and also the Second Minister for Law. And I feel a little old now sitting in this company of these young people, but I'm glad to see that the energy that they have, I can feed off the energy that they all have. So I'm very happy to be here having a discussion with you.
All right. Hi, my name is Gavin. I'm a diploma student at the Nanyang Academy of Fine Arts. I study arts management, and I really enjoy involving myself in a community work.
Certainly. Now, before we go on, members of the audience, I'd like to ask you a little question. Have you ever wondered why it took you so long to decide what to eat for lunch? When somebody asks you what you want for lunch, do you realize that you spend a lot of time thinking about it? And if you're wondering why, you probably know that if you eat something for lunch, your stomach is occupied, your appetite is satisfied, and you cannot have both chicken rice and 10 other dishes at the same time. You can only appreciate one at the same time. And that's really what a trade-off is. It's an opportunity cost. When you have something, you have to give up another. And sometimes you want to make, sometimes you have to make decisions between to consider between two bad pieces of reasons, rather than choosing between a good and a bad. And that's what a trade-off is. And that's what today's conversation is all about. And to kick off, the conversation, we just run through several topics and feel free to share your opinions freely. Share it freely. Okay. Let's start off with a very interesting question, because this is the month of August and National Day has just passed. If you read through social media and all that, you may have encountered little bits of narratives about how maybe we should have cancelled the National Day. Now, I'd like to firstly seek your thoughts. We don't have to go left to right, or everyone just feel free to share at the same time. How would you have felt if National Day really was cancelled this year or last year?
Actually, was it cancelled last year?
No, it never was cancelled.
Oh, okay.
So this is hypothetical.
We had a scaled down version last year.
Oh, okay.
But just like we did this year, but it was not cancelled.
Oh, okay.
How would you feel if National, imagine, Straits Times headlines, National Day cancelled 2021 or 2020?
The headline sounds quite depressing. Yeah, if we just cancelled it with no alternative. Yeah, and I think I've heard about some debates going on about why we should cancel National Day, and from what I understand, it seems like it's because National Day costs a lot of money, and that money could have been used to be redistributed to the poor. Yeah, so to that end, I can empathize with why we should cancel National Day. On a personal level, National Day parades are meaningful to me because they used to be when my entire family gets together. But that has kind of been undercut by COVID because we cannot gather anymore. So I'm more ambivalent about cancelling National Day this year and last year.
Not for it.
Yes, on the fence, can see the tensions. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'll share my views. I'm glad it was we went ahead with it, and I think it's of course a balance between safety, public health safety, and those considerations. Like Qian Qian says, also whether we have a budget for it, and of course also an occasion to bring Singaporeans together, literally and figuratively onto the same platform to celebrate the occasion. This year, I don't know whether all of you watched it, but I felt that in some ways, having a scaled down version, lower budget, so less light and sound and maybe a few less fireworks, really brought the storyline to the fore a lot more. And I sat there and I listened to the dialogue and I watched the images on the screen, and I thought it was a lot more moving, and it really explained to us how ordinary Singaporeans put up such an extraordinary contribution to make Singapore what it is today. So I felt that part was meaningful, and I feel that now that I look back, I feel we would have lost something if we didn't have the parade, we didn't have this storyline, and we didn't have this occasion for us, despite COVID and despite the troubles that we all face, to come together to celebrate our 56th birthday. So I'm glad we had it.
Absolutely. Lastrina, how would you have felt?
Yeah, for me, I mean, it like what Qian Qian and Minister mentioned, it'll be a total disappointment for me if we were to cancel this totally. But also maybe from a very personal angle, right? I saw three things happening. So the first one is, so I'm from the environment scene, and I've seen how the NDP Exco try to engage green groups and trying to get us to work on different green initiatives or angles for NDP, and like cutting down the number of items in the NDP pack, for example. So I saw that effort happening behind the scene, and for me to cancel NDP totally would mean that effort itself will go to waste. So I didn't want to see that happening. So there's that part about the green groups. There's that part about the performers themselves. I think this year we had 1/3 of the usual number of performers on stage, and the fact that these performers still managed to give and create something that was super like celebratory and very meaningful. I thought, yeah, if we didn't have NDP, we wouldn't have seen all these efforts. And I think the third part is in terms of the scale. This year, with the postponement and everything, we also cancelled some rehearsals. We postponed some rehearsals. And I think from the production company point of view, like Bu Jun Feng and team, right, they put in a lot of effort into making this thing very concert-like, I feel. That even if, we scaled down the whole thing, like it still felt like a concert watching from home. So I just, saw all these things happening. And I think for me, from that personal angle, it would be a waste to cancel this totally. So maybe, to scale back or to minimize the number of participants was a great initiative by itself. I don't think we should cancel that totally. Yeah.
I thought Jun Feng did a great job.
He did a great
It would
job,
have been
fantastic.
a pity if people didn't get to see how he saw Singapore through his artistic direction and his lens. So it would have been a shame if we didn't get to see it.
This year we had a lot of artists, like the illustrators, the animators, the mural artists. So there's a lot of work put in that I think it should be out there.
And it gave, if I may say something else, it gave a chance for maybe the less popular artists, singers, performers to really rise up.
Yeah.
We didn't have all the usual names, but I thought they did a fantastic job coming together. I mean, I loved our NDP song this year.
Yeah.
It was fantastic.
Personally, I don't really follow the NDP celebration because I tend to celebrate Singapore, personally, right, and through the songs that we've created, and I guess in the part of Singapore that I live in. I think NDP is a way for lots of us to appreciate where Singapore has come, how far we've come, and as a general rule, I'm sure you've done the math and balanced the risk of COVID and everything. So I trust that it was a good decision to have NDP this year.
Yeah, we seem to have a theme coming up. When we hear safety, very clear. Then we also hear things like, disappointment, something is missing, something very intangible. What do we think the intangible thing is that we're giving up?
Giving up in...
If we never had if National Day was cancelled this year.
I'm assuming I'm supposed to answer this.
You can if you like.
Yeah, I think, as they've all given their replies, the difference, the point of distinction is that people have different perspectives on NDP, the value that it has for Singapore. Personally, I probably would side with Dylan. As a kid, National Day Parade was great. You have a holiday from school, you turn on your TV, you watch this huge parade, and it's fun. But now, I enjoy it more sitting in my room, looking out the window, watching the flyby. My parents getting to stay home from work, and yes, family time, but it's not so much a large scale thing. So I guess, in my opinion, I would have lost that small bit. I can't say that I would have been so disappointed because I understand that the benefits that we get from cancelling it. But I would also understand if some other Singaporeans would feel so let down and so much more disappointed because that's such a strong point of cultural importance to us. Yeah. And I guess that's the idea here, right? That different things mean different amounts of value to different people.
From an artistic perspective, if I may ask you, since you're in that field, how did you see the parade, or did you watch the parade at all?
I watched bits of it.
Yeah.
I watched snippets. I think the first thing I was very happy about was the audience that made up of healthcare workers and our frontliners, and that was straight away identified as a very, very good way to switch a narrative. Who are we really doing it for? Singaporeans, yes, but for the past 1.5 years, these people have been at the front, And arts and culture is the same. It's really about telling stories and telling the truth. I agree from a cultural perspective and all the effort that's been put into it. Cancel the whole thing, and it's very sad. But I mean, I guess it really depends, And I'm happy that it went on, and I'm happy that Singapore reacted the way it did. But I would have completely understood that.
Okay, all right.
So I just want to have a fun fact here. I just want to see how we celebrate National Day nowadays. When I was a kid, National Day means family gets together, television set. One thing must be present: KFC. So I don't know if I don't know why it's red and white, but KFC must be there. And there was no hot and crispy back then. It was just original. Then we'd eat, and after that, we're in perfect view because the flag would fly by, and wow, it feels like that. Do y'all still do that these days? Is there still KFC, or is that just my family?
Pre-COVID, we would gather to eat at a relative's house who had a good view of the fireworks, but we don't order KFC, we cook.
Healthier.
Home cooked food for sure.
For me, pre-COVID, I think the family would just go out somewhere near Marina area and just to see the fireworks. So no food, but we did go outdoors. Yeah.
Lovely. Yeah. So that's how I remember the KFC. Yeah. All my friends all had KFC for some reason. So I don't know, maybe it's just some some cultural thing. Now let's try imagine 25 years in the. Let's imagine. Let's stay on the topic that National Day was cancelled, and 25 years it's 25 years in the future, right? So you're probably 40. For everybody's 40 already, lah.
No.
40.
Yeah, it's still 40.
Sorry, I'm offside.
What do you think Singaporeans then would think of today? What do you think they would say about today's lost National Day?
Singaporeans back then.
No.
40 years later.
40, yeah, 25 years later.
The Singaporeans, would they have gone through this? They have lived. This have been a part of their lives.
Probably not. Some people would have been born, like today, and then 25 years later they'll be 25 years old. What do you think the 25 years old of then would think?
I don't think they would understand.
Yeah, I don't think they care.
They wouldn't be able to.
You don't think so?
No. I think they'll think back and be like, oh, there's this COVID thing that I was born in.
Yes.
But I wasn't there. I didn't know what it was like. It's like, yeah.
I mean, the fact that that NDP is cancelled, I think people will probably think that, something more serious or more important happened, and that is COVID. And that, I think it wouldn't change anything, and people would still be thinking about COVID and not NDP itself being cancelled.
Yeah, it's like if you ask us to think about, World War II, right? We understand it sucked and it was tragic, but we didn't live through it.
Yeah, but I think that's the thing. It's of course the lived experience defines you a lot because it's personal. But at the same time, I think my view is that we need to develop a deeper sense of appreciation of events that shape the environment we live in, even if we had not ourselves lived through it. So yes, I don't identify with World War II because I wasn't alive then. But it certainly shaped a lot of what my country is today. It certainly defines the way my own parents and my grandparents think about situations in Japan and how they live through that period. I mean, I cannot fathom, and I can only listen to them. But it does play a part in how I am today as well.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that kids in the future will think back and I think they'll understand what COVID did to the world.
Yeah.
Right? Because nothing has done something like this in a long time to the world. But yeah, I suppose to your point, you're right. I'm not saying they shouldn't understand it. I think they don't,
But they don't fully identify with it. That's
Yeah,
what you're
yeah,
saying. I get it. Yeah.
I wouldn't, I wouldn't like to assume that, hopefully after this is all past, our history textbooks reflect on COVID a lot heavier. And you never know, hopefully that all that education will do a better job of emphasizing the importance of National Day. And even if they never went through it, like you said, World War II and every tragedy in the history of the world, COVID will be something that really shows its importance.
Yeah.
And the missed National Day will be one of them.
Yeah. There's also a sense of empathy for another generation. As Minister did say, my grandmother did live through World War II. For me, it's just something I read from the textbooks, but it shapes how she reacts to the world and how she, when you talk about things like, I want to fulfill my ambitions and this and that, but for her it's very, it's very practical. Does it bring money? Does it feed the family and so on and so forth? This is where sometimes, between generations, there ought to be some empathy to understand what each other has lived through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think these occasions, I think likewise my grandmother lived through it. So when my only first-hand experience of the war is of course through her account. And this is what also helps us to build bonds between generations, She is not able to relate to what I do most of the time. Neither can I for her life, but she shares those experiences with me, and I think that's how I see it. So to Dylan's point, I was saying to him just now that we do, I think, learn also about different generations, and we learn the different perspectives of our grandparents who really live and understand the world in a very different time zone. But through these shared experiences and shared moments, I think we gain a better understanding of each other.
Yeah. If what I'm hearing seems to be that, I think I recently came across a saying that says that it takes 3 generations to forget lessons. For example, like in Japan, I think that there was a giant rock that commemorated, not really commemorated, but wanted to serve as a warning for future generations not to build houses below a certain point. But after 3 generations, that was forgotten, and then 100 years later, when a flood came, a lot of people died. So I take the point that we should remember certain things. And I think maybe another way to ask the question that Ben posed is, how should we remember this year's choice to shift National Day, to delay and to scale down? And personally, I think my first thought was, whoa, like that also can. National Day 9 August, we just shift to 21st.
Like, can just choke. We do again later.
We just postpone, we never cancel. And I think that's a very pragmatic move that I thought was a very nice compromise between, we want to keep the intangibles, we want to keep that spirit, that meaning, even if it's shifted a little. And I think that being able to shift the date reflects a kind of resilience in the symbol itself, that it is about the people performing and the people watching and knowing that it happened. So I think being able to balance the intangible and the safety concerns and the cost concerns, I think that is one way I would like this year's National Day to be remembered.
I think that's very well said.
Yeah. And that was actually a beautiful point. The shifting of the day, that's the way to find middle ground. We don't cancel, we don't exactly hold it, well we did hold it in the day, but the celebrations were shifted. And like you say, like that also can, but wow, isn't that a way to cross, to find middle ground? I think that's a good example of how trade-offs can actually, we have decisions met in the center.
Yeah.
Okay, now, anything else before I jump on?
No, I was just wondering, and thanks to Qian for highlighting that. And I'm just picking up certain phrases, like earlier on you mentioned building the building empathy side of things, and the need for intangible assets. And I'm just wondering, like, at the end of the day, for me, in terms of building that Singapore society or Singapore culture, whatever you want to call it, like, I wouldn't identify National Day alone as that one event for me to be able to relate to, what being a Singaporean means. So I feel like there's so many other conversations we can have, and all this culminates to me then relating back to Singapore. And so then 25 years down the road, if you ask me, like, was it okay that NDP was cancelled? I think for me, the answer would still be yes, because there's other things that I remember about Singapore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Stuff. Okay, we'll shift into another talking point. Let's talk about regardless of race, language, or religion. And by the way, it's regardless. There's not irregardless. There's no such word as irregardless. Anyway, so race, language, and religion are very powerful symbols of humanity. So much so that countries and entire peoples go to war with each other over these symbols. As you can see every day in your current affairs, you read news of this all the time. Singapore has an aspiration to harmonize race, language, and religion, and build an ecosystem where there is stability and where there is harmony. So, I'm very proud to always tell my foreign friends that we are one of the few places in the world where you can walk on the street and you see a church, a mosque, and a temple all side by side. And we understand, this harmony and stability. Maybe just to get our feet wet, what are the things that you observe about Singapore that is quite unique and you're quite proud to share with your friends about?
Well, the hawker centre. It's a melting pot of different things, and I think the closest to Singaporeans' hearts, right? You eat.
Yeah.
And where else in the world? I also tell my foreign friends, can you find stalls, Malay, Indian stalls, Chinese stalls? It's now fashionable to have Western food stalls as well. All, literally in the same place. And on top of that, after you finish and you buy your food, you go and sit at the table, and you can be right next to a person who is eating a different kind of food from a different race. And you're all sharing a table, and sometimes you make friends, and just have a casual chat over lunch or over dinner. And I think that's what, in a very simple way, exemplifies Singaporean life. That's how I see it.
That's true. Yeah. That's where, whatever your religion is or whatever your practice is, you sit there and then we exchange and talk about it. Yes, that's definitely one. That's definitely one. Anything else you guys have observed?
I think for me, in terms of, regardless of race and religion, what's unique about Singapore is that from young, or maybe not so much about kindergarten, but like primary school onwards, it's very easy for us to make friends with a person of another race or another religion. And I think that's what I like about it, right? We're not a homogeneous society. It's so diverse, and you can start building that relationship with a diverse community from young. And I'm just thinking about different communities all over the world. That's something that's not easily accessible. And having that opportunity, and I would say privilege, to grow up in that kind of environment in Singapore gives us a very different perspective about race and religion at a younger age.
Yeah.
One thing about Singapore that I will be happy to share with. Personally, I spent some time in Australia, so I was quite excited to share the food that we have, and I chose to share Peranakan food because I think that's a term that it's not really well known outside of, let's say, Southeast Asia. Yeah, and I remember I shared a particular kueh kueh with my classmates, and they just couldn't imagine. They had never tasted pandan before, and they asked me what was pandan. How do I describe this flavor? How else can they find it? I was like, kaya, and they also don't understand.
No
they
idea.
just cannot imagine the flavor of pandan. Yeah, so I think that's just one. Yeah, that's one thing that that's a fond memory that I have from my time in Australia. But I also understand like the issues of race and religion now has been a pretty hot topic, especially on social media, and it might be easy for me to share how happy or how comfortable I felt in Singapore. When I was in Australia, there's always that subtle feeling of being an outsider, and it's hard to pinpoint why, hard to pinpoint where, and it's even harder to say that you are responsible for me feeling like an outsider. So yeah, I think currently, personally, I'm at the stage where I'm considering what gave rise to my comfort growing up in Singapore. Yeah. So it's like when I came back from Australia, I was like, oh, I'm home. I'm finally with my people. And then the conversations nowadays are making me rethink or reconsider the what structures that comfort for me. Yeah.
I suppose I'm only 19, so I'm still discovering what you guys have been sharing about Singapore. I suppose outside of the general uniqueness that Singapore has of being multiracial and all that stuff, I love to share the music that we have with some of my friends. I studied in Finland for a while,
Yes.
as you know. And we like the typical rock, Guns N' Roses, Pink Floyd, that kind of stuff. And then I showed them the Western Union Band, Matthew and the Mandarins. I'm just very proud of that. I'm happy to share that with my chaps.
Do they like and appreciate that music? Because that's really
because we're all
classic Singaporean 70s music. You know?
Yeah, we're all fans, so it's interesting to see what they say. It's like a Singapore take on rock, It's fun.
Don't forget Zircon Lounge, Heritage, Speedway,
Heard
Gingerbread.
of one of them.
I'm just at this point just curious a little bit. So all of us are relatively young.
Yes, of course.
All of us are relatively young.
Relatively young, yes.
And we grew
Just
up,
don't need to say relatively.
all of us are young. And we grew up in a Singapore that's like this already. It's relatively stable and all that. But I just want to quickly get your sense. How many of you, on a scale of 1 to 10, how difficult was it? Do you feel that Singapore, how much effort do you think Singapore put in to get this level of stability? 1 being very, very easy and 10 being extremely difficult. Just to get a sense. Maybe it's like Gavin now, we always start with there. So.
Okay.
Scale 1 to 10. 1 easy, 10 difficult.
10.
10. Okay.
Have to be 10.
Yeah, I suppose it's relative, but it will certainly feel like a 10 for all the people that carved out Singapore. They'll definitely say it's a 10.
It's hard for me to pinpoint to a number because I guess for myself, I grew up in this environment already, right? But then I'm thinking about like our history and how, like, for example, previously Lee Kuan Yew has to think about. I mean, when we talk about race and the Chinese in Singapore and the Chinese in China, when we talk about Malays in Singapore and the relation with like Malays in the neighboring countries, and for me, like, I can't put a number to that. I'm pretty sure like it's more than 10, the kind of difficulties that we've had to face, the kind of conversations we've had to have. How do you then shape and try to construct the kind of racial identity and composition we want in Singapore? Like, I can't imagine what that number looks like. I just know that I grew up in an environment where it's already established for me, and so currently it's a bit easier for me compared to the previous generation maybe.
Yeah, I agree with not being able to put a number, because I guess like the existence of a scale assumes that we can have some, objective measure of difficulty that people across time and space can agree on. I want to believe that, I think it's not difficult to imagine that many people across the world are working hard for their livelihoods in their respective countries. And I'm very sure that the people that came before me worked very hard to give me what I have today. So I want to, I want to acknowledge that. But I guess the converse side is also that there are different difficulties today. And it's quite hard to compare apple for apple when these things are all quite incomparable and irreducible.
I just wanted to like add a layer to this conversation, right? I think the kind of chats we're having now, we're probably thinking about the Singaporean layer, but I'm just looking at the Singapore resident population and like the amount of migrant workers, foreign domestic workers we have, and we now have all these different conversations about race and nationalities and all this like online social discourse that can be discriminating. And for me, maybe the work now is needed to bridge that differences between like locals and non-locals. Like, how do we actually bridge that?
So I was reminded of this point because when you talked about Australia and Finland, these are homogeneous countries. People speak one language of one race and one everything. but for us, we are not homogenous. We are multi-race, multi-language, multi-everything. And when you put different tribes together, there's bound to be conflict. So the difficulty that goes in is I can imagine is not easy work at all.
Indeed.
Yeah. We had to have a common. Well, we're all speaking one language now, and that was actually by decision. That was by purpose. Our living spaces are all very well mixed, and that was also by decision. Yeah, and as we move further in the future, new problems would arise. Things that were solutions in the past could become problems tomorrow. As Lastrina pointed out, you brought out migrant workers, new nationalities, and all that. Then there needs to be new discourse and new way of addressing these issues. Which is why I thought this was important.
Actually, I wanted to disagree slightly because actually Australia's not really a homogeneous society. And they have a lot of indigenous peoples, and even the indigenous peoples, activists fought very hard to have the S behind the peoples because there are just so many hundreds of distinct language communities, and so actually they are also, I guess from an outsider's perspective, going through a reckoning with how one particular group has dominated for so long, and they are also reconsidering their structures. And and I was just thinking about your point on how we're all speaking one language, English. I guess I'm not sure how much of a choice that was, and more because we were colonized. And that is also an issue across many of the countries today that were colonized. And English is now the working language, I guess, more or less globally. It helps to facilitate, let's say, economic transactions and cultural exchange. We will translate, code switch. But it also, I guess, came at a cost, and I don't think we can quantify that cost of colonization. So maybe from one way we could think of it is that was a problem in the past, and it's still an ongoing problem, but it gave rise to this unintentional global medium of communication, which is the English language. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yes, thank you for the reminder on the Australian conversation. But the language part, actually, yes, although we were colonized, there were actually decisions that went to into having English as the operating medium. We've been through in the past, should be Malay, and Malay remains our official language. Should it be Chinese, and what kind of Chinese, and so on? That was actually severely considered in the past. All this in history books but English was landed on still as the medium of administration, just so we keep factions away and we have a common operating language. I hope my history is correct here.
More or less. But I mean, what Qian Qian says raises a point about what you said earlier about trade-offs. We had to, which I think is the point you're getting to, whether from colonization or because we felt that English was the stronger language of internationalization, we have adopted English, but at a cost as well to us. Just as adopting Mandarin, speaking Mandarin as the, as a second language, mother tongue, whether it's Mandarin or Malay or Tamil, it also comes at a cost. For the Chinese, we see that dialects have been a lot more marginalized. And I look at my grandparents, they can only speak dialect. My children hardly speak to so their great-grandparents. There's a real language barrier because they cannot speak the dialect as well. So I feel that we there are trade-offs in this way. When you want to have some standing, and of course no one can begrudge the fact that we are now very proficient in Mandarin, the Chinese speakers, because Mandarin is gaining a lot of traction, and it's a lot of, you talk about English, actually Mandarin is almost as strong a language of transaction as English has been in the past. But it comes at a cost to us too. As a group of different, in your words, peoples from the different Chinese dialects, we lose something.
Did we miss any thoughts?
No, I think sacrifices have to be made along the way. And like you said, we can't quantify what. And I think we're still making sacrifices today. One example is the passive integration policy. Not everyone understands it. There are many trade-offs in the implementation of this policy, and some people still view the benefits that it brings us as lesser than the cost that we have to give up for. I guess I'm proud of how far we've come, sacrifices my ancestors. But I'm wondering if there's a better way to go about this. We've achieved a lot, and earlier in the topic of what I'm proud of as a Singaporean, I share about would be the ability to coexist. We talk about Australia, and you said they're going through a reckoning. In the US, I won't specify which, but racial differences exist, and at a much greater level, I would say, in Singapore. But they exist here as well, and they're growing. And I just wonder sometimes if we need to think as well: are we headed on the right path? Are we putting enough value to these issues as we should be? And the trade-offs that we're making, are they the right trade-offs? I guess no one will have the right answer.
No, but these are very, very important questions. And it goes back to a point that Ben made earlier about how solutions in the past must always be reviewed because they could become problems in the future. And I think we must always look at solutions dynamically because each generation is different, considerations are different. I mean, my parents, their parents grew up in very different conditions from my children. And I think we have to fashion solutions that meet the needs of each new emerging generation. And I think we can best do it if questions that you have just articulated, Daniel, are asked and also talked about. We may not agree, we may not find the right answers. And as you say, there may not be a consensus even on what the right answer is. But I think that needs to be flushed out. Because without that, I think you can't move forward.
Yeah, Gavin's point actually is a great lead into the next question. So race and religion has been the reasons behind a lot of global movements. You look in the States, you have things like such as your Black Lives Matter and so on and so forth. In Singapore, we have our own brand of racial harmony. We have our own views of stability, and we have things that we want to work towards, an ideal. So, what is this ideal, and do you think we are there yet? I mean, even in today's point of view, are we there? Are we at peak stability, racial harmony, so on?
The first thing which popped in my head was the Reach and Sao session with Minister Shanmugam. And I was just looking at the clips of the questions being asked to him, and I was trying to be kind to that segment, right, and trying to understand, maybe people grew up with certain understanding or certain perceptions of other communities, and that's why they were posing such questions.
Was this the question about the Chinese making decisions on?
There were several questions, but overall, right, it made me feel I have to acknowledge that there are groups like that, or there are people like that. And then, to your question, right, then my ideal society would be one where we see each other as equal, although I don't think that's realistic. But one where we see each other as equal and we do not discriminate and we do not see, just because there's a majority, we should have influence over the minority. So that's my ideal society. Although realistically speaking, I'm not sure how we can reach that level. Yeah.
I'd like to refer to that event with Reach as well. I'm happy that that when you saw it, when you saw the clips, that the first thought was kindness, or you're trying to understand it. For me, the first emotion was surprise. Surprise because I didn't expect those kind of questions to be asked at a platform like that. Surprise can have a negative connotation, a positive one. In this context, I was just wondering, what does it mean for all the progress that we've made? Some people, may see that you have the fair right to ask a question, it's your opinion, and you can have it answered. And others may think such questions should not be asked. And as you said, how far are we? I don't think it should be an endpoint. About how realistic a homogeneous society can be, I think it's possible. I think why not? I don't think humans were made to discriminate on such superficial levels. Sure, cultural differences exist, but I think it's possible to accept these. So I definitely think that we're far way off. We're happy to have made all the progress that we have, but should keep our expectations as high as we can.
Yeah, I agree. I think you mentioned Black Lives Matter and other movements. I think there are many of these movements, philosophies, I think need to chart our own course, because we have had 56 years of history, and if you add a couple of more years prior to that, when we had with Malaysia, we have a background that I think shapes where we are today, like Daniel says, where we should be heading to. But I think there are also very unique circumstances. To just illustrate one, which is a point that I had made, I think in Parliament before, and it's we look at our diverse backgrounds, ethnicity, culture, language, as not like as a melting pot. We don't put everything into one pot and say, here, mix it all up and you come out as one. Much like what European countries do. Many European countries are migrant countries. Germany, France, right? You look at them and they insist that whether you come from Africa into France, Algerians, Tunisians, Ethiopians, many of them have migrated to France, but you must speak French, right? And ethnically, they may look a bit different, but you must speak French. So we don't do that here. We never insisted on that. And we looked at it as, in local parlance, in my food analogy, we are more like rojak, in that everyone is unique and distinct. You can taste the cucumber, the turnip, the pineapple, what is that bean curd thing? Tau pok. Yeah, tau kwa. And they're all different in taste on its own, but blended together with the sauce, you know that this is the rojak dish, right? So I feel that we are more like this, and we must preserve this. This is what's special about Singapore, that each of our different backgrounds, we're all Singaporeans, but we come together and we know about, learn about, respect, and in many ways also appreciate and enjoy another person's food, culture, background, music. Like you said, we have much to cherish. And I feel going down this path like this enlarges our space rather than narrows it. Because if we try and make everybody homogeneous without acknowledging that actually we might speak the same language, sound the same, but actually we are brought up differently. We have different beliefs culturally, religiously. We're not all the same, but when we come together, we're all Singaporean, but we all have our different, unique differences that we come together and celebrate. And I think that's what sets us apart, which makes, I think, our formula and our blend of nation building, in my view, more sustainable.
I'd like to pose a question to
Sure,
you.
sure.
So the root question was how far we've left to go, and I guess our personal ideas of what the end goal would be like. I'd love to hear yours.
I like the aspiration and the objective of saying one day that we're all Singaporean, we're all homogenous, we don't need policies to keep our housing, our workplaces, our everything about the way we live. We don't have to engineer it. I'd like to get there. And I would like for us to choose naturally that we don't mind living next to a family of a different race, above us, below us, work together with so and so, we'll go to workplace. I like us to choose that naturally, and I think we can get there one day. But for now, I think we have to be realistic and appreciate that those differences do exist. I think you just look very close to our own country, across the border, and we can see that, racial politics, identity politics, it's not unrealistic, it's there. So we do need to be mindful of this, and that journey, therefore, I think is still ongoing. We've got to still keep in my view, some of these rail guards in place, and but constantly evaluate how relevant it is. If it is no longer relevant, remove it. If it needs to be tweaked, we have to have the courage to tweak. Because each generation will interplay with each other differently. And the rules and policies we have in place, well as it has served us, must continue to be refined so that it will serve a new generation of people.
Very good, very good. Qian Qian or Dylan, is there anything you want to add to that question? Are we there yet? Are we at peak at our harmony and stability? Are we there yet?
No, but I mean, I'm not as educated as you guys on this matter, but you know, I agree with your view. It has to change along with the context of the world. And that's, I think, one of the most important things in trade-offs as well is the context of which they happen.
Mhm.
Yeah, hearing what the minister said, I guess my answer is also no. We're not there yet, and our there, I think, will probably be a process where our equality in differences are honoured, and so just to acknowledge like that dialogue that we were talking about just now. Like when I heard some of the questions that were posed, my first reaction was the hubris behind posing such a question. And then I think instances like that make it quite clear that we are not there yet. We still have some fair bit to go before we can reach a process where we can honour everyone as individuals. And underlying us as individuals is a form of equality, and we can recognize that we are all different. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think the whole point here is that the destructive power of human symbology really cannot be underestimated. There are negative results that sometimes you can get in and you'll never ever get out again, as we can read and see from developments all around us. There are movements that are happening overseas, but really we must also consider the local context. Sometimes we have to consider to see whether these things are applicable to our society or not before we jump on a movement that's quite fashionable. Yeah. So we'll come to the next the last talking point. Let's go deep into the topic of trade-offs. And what better way to understand this but to look at it as bread and butter versus ideals. So these are all really rapid fire questions just to find out what you all think of these topics. So firstly, we have COVID right now. So protect lives first or protect livelihoods first?
I think I better eye power you.
Between lives and livelihoods, I guess my comment is that they are actually just two sides of the same coin. And if I were forced to pick an answer, I would say lives, because you can't have a livelihood without your lives first. Yeah, I guess like the lives versus livelihoods maps quite nicely to the rhetoric about the economy versus public health. And I've heard some MPs talk about how actually they are not actually dichotomous. So I quite agree with that kind of answer, that lives and livelihoods, they are not dichotomous.
So tackle both, but if your question is which one first, then lives first.
Yeah, completely agree.
The easy answer, I agree.
From an existential perspective, it has to be right? I mean, from Qian Qian, it's got to be right.
Yeah, that's what the ex-New York governor also said about it. No lives, no livelihood. So there's really no choice.
But it's a tough call. It's a tough call. I mean,
Yes.
every day we hear stories. I'm sure you all come across your own examples of people who really struggle. I mean, to them, the livelihood being affected, being curtailed, not being able to work, to make a living, more than just for themselves, but for their family. It's not just a physical issue. It's a mental, emotional drain on them. And many breadwinners suffer. They suffer greatly, and it's a really, really tough call to make, honestly. I mean, you might say, we must protect vulnerable, keep people safe, keep people at home, therefore close. But the impact on so many other people across the spectrum of the economy is quite unimaginable. And the blow that they feel is not just a financial one. They feel that they can't provide for the family. They feel that they're unable to do what they're supposed to do. I mean, the breadwinner of the family, usually the parent, one of the parents. So it's a very tough thing to do. And it impacts not just the financial side. People always associate livelihoods only with finances. It's not just about that. It's also about, the impact it has on children, how they see their breadwinner family, how they see their parents, the respect, the bond that they have. I think all that has been undermined because of COVID. And it's not just about the ability to earn some money.
Absolutely.
So-
And
Oh,
yes,
sorry.
go ahead.
It was meant to be rapid fire, but I just wanted to build on that point. Yeah, I think what you said about like the different impacts. I guess the people who see lives and livelihoods where the trade-off is most painful for those people. So probably the poor or the people who really have to go to work in spite of COVID, then maybe that is when our resources should be channeled to those people and to help them secure their lives and their livelihoods first. Yeah, so I guess just acknowledging that COVID impacts people differently, and then looking out for these people first and channeling our resources there.
Yeah, I've asked the same question to like small business owners, hawkers, this just for fun lah. Just ask them, just to disturb them a bit. and the answer didn't come so easily. For them, it's not, for us, it's really okay, life first. But for them, it would be sales is bad, and I've got to find ways at this age. What job am I going to go into? So so if you want to go into another lockdown or circuit breaker, it's to them, it's not so straightforward an answer. They would struggle a bit, and then they'll tell you that actually they don't know. Just leave it to the powers that be to decide. So I think that's just one example of a trade-off.
Yeah. Well, I think those are two very important groups in our society, lives and livelihoods, right? So now we try and do both. We try and help both. We try and protect the vulnerable. We bring out vaccinations to a level that helps us achieve some kind of herd immunity. At least keep the severity of the disease down if you do catch it. So that's protecting lives. At the same time, when you do that to a certain critical level, you allow yourself to open up a bit more safely so the economy can function a bit better. So these are all steps that you help to supplement each other. So besides the vaccination, you have the regular testing, you have the trace, you monitor. I'm sure you know that MOH looks at wastewater for each block, and once you pick up something, you move very quickly. So there is an aspect of our ops which is focused on protecting lives in order that livelihoods can really come back up again, so economy can open, businesses can open up again. So that's been an approach that we take, and I think increasingly as we get our vaccination rates up, we can do more of this.
Excellent. Thank you. The next question would be land use. Singapore is only some 800 square kilometers, really not very big. I think in half an hour you can travel from Tuas to Changi. So, which is more important, history and forests, or homes and living spaces? Not strictly those things, but these are just the categories. So I think Lastrina, this is ecology versus economy, always very difficult.
Okay, now we eye power you.
That's a tough question.
Tough question, huh?
I think for me it's definitely both, right? History and forest, home living, development. And for me, I'm coming from the perspective where I see, like, for example, from the work of MND and how they try to transform Singapore, right? From garden city, city in a garden, and now city in nature, and how we are becoming more aggressive in planting trees and trying to protect our biodiversity. I use the word trying. And I'm just coming from this overall macro perspective, and I see that both are equally important, and it depends on context and which land use, which land planning we're talking about. And in the context of Singapore, like, I understand there's land constraint and all, but for me, at the back of my head, I'm also thinking about why are we still cutting down forests intentionally or not intentionally? The fact that we're doing this is because we're still developing, and the idea of Singapore developing and being in development, that will never stop. So for me, I'm thinking, like, how do we then change the narrative of changing Singapore's ideals of just stopping development and stopping this consumerist society, and changing that narrative to one that can live with nature and appreciating nature as it is. Yeah. So for me, it's a tough question. And the way I see it, I think there needs to be a reframe of how we see ourselves living in Singapore. Yeah.
But it's really a multifaceted question as well, because you can probably live with, it's about adjusting the balance, which one tilts in favor of where. You can probably tilt more in favor of nature and heritage and history if you then have a bit of compromise on the consumer needs, as you put it. And that in turn also depends on the extent to which we say, for example, we feel we need to grow our population.
Yeah.
Because if you have more population, you will need more housing and so on. And in turn, the question also impacts the economy. If you have a population that is aging very quickly like ours is, and you don't have a supplemental workforce, we are not going to be a competitive economy. And that in turn has other impacts. So it's a multifaceted question, and therefore there are multiple trade-offs along the way in just answering one question. It's something that, you know, I'm sure all of us face every day. I mean, you use a simple way of asking, you know, what you have for lunch. But actually, what we want to do in policy is very much with all these questions in mind. And sometimes at various stages, it cuts across dimensions of not just people, but also time. Because the more you take from land that is natural now, the less there will be for future generations. So it's not just about us relatively, but us with a different time dimension as well. The future of Singapore and Singaporeans.
Yeah.
Certainly. Dylan, you're trying to do a little bit of both, right? You're trying to bring some ecology into people's homes.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about this this project of yours?
Yeah. And so I'm trying a bit more on the micro scale. We know about the green plan and 30 by 30. So I'm trying to do a different approach. So the government is doing sort of huge industrial farms to get us to be a bit more sustainable, which is fantastic, by the way. But I'm trying to do it a bit more from the bottom up. So trying to make apartments more sustainable and fertile. Okay? And that also allows the opportunity to create a community.
Yeah.
So I hope you don't mind the plug. My product is called the One Kind Block. It's the world's first Lego-like hydroponic system. And you know, apartments aren't designed for urban farming. So I created a system that could adapt to any apartment. So your HDBs, right? Your windows, balconies, corridors, you can grow as much as you want. It's like Lego. So you just keep adding and you can just keep growing.
Yeah. So Dylan and his family lives in my constituency, and I visited his home before. I mean, beside the fact that they have a real, I mean, it's like nature, walking to nature. I mean, a small plug for his grandmother is that she's a fantastic cook as well. But leaving that aside, yeah, I've seen how they have adapted it. And actually, that's one way where everyone, regardless of where you live and how big or small a piece of land you have, you can actually do urban farming. And you should have a look at what he's designed. Really innovative, and helps you to feel that you're doing your part for green, you know?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Come, give it.
I think,
Rapid fire.
yeah, I think ideas like that carry more than the tangible benefits, you know? Yes, you're creating urban farming for the small HDBs that we live in, but you're also teaching people what trade-offs are really all about. You know, the government might make sacrifices and you might not be able to understand them, but little things like hanging the plants on your windowsill, this is why we're making those sacrifices. We have to give up space elsewhere, we have to cut down these forests, but you can contribute to the bigger cause that you feel is important. And if you think that growing plants and, you know, this philosophical way of taking care of the environment and the planet, then invest in projects like these.
Yeah.
And my question that I think I asked when I was first reached out to talk on this panel is, how do we make people understand the importance of trade-offs? People, it's easy to look at them as option A and option B, completely separate. But as we've discussed here again and again, they're not. But the average Singaporean doesn't understand it, and it's understandable. But how can we push the idea better? And I think projects like yours, I'm really impressed by, is one of those things.
Yeah, I think we tend to forget that, like I said, the context is very important. If a building I don't know where I'm going with this, but if a building is on fire, the trade-off holds more, what's the word?
Your survival instincts will kick in.
Yeah. What's more, I can't think of the word. Power? Something along the lines of power.
Significance.
Significance, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think most of us forget the fire in the building. And we like to talk about the trade-offs here and there. And they're important, they're part of the decision-making process, but you can't forget about the fire in the building.
Fire in the building refers to aging population, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
But it could also refer to the parity of the community.
Yeah, climate change, yeah.
So which fire is bigger?
Yeah, and I think Gavin's question was the most important one. You know, how do we get people to understand, you know, the topic of trade-offs?
Yeah.
How much, you know, discussion there is, and how much a debate there is. And that's what we're really trying to do. We're trying to get people to talk, to understand, to have more civil discourse, rather than to go on the internet and flame each other and scold each other and all that, which, by the way, social media is designed to do just that. We want people to look at each other's point of view and to understand what is, the fire in the building, and to come to common ground on and accept some of these trade-offs that we have to incorporate into our decisions in public policy, in public decision making. And that's all the time we have for today.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for your thoughts. There was very rich discussion, rich sharing. Maybe at this point, any final closing points from any one of us?
I power him this time.
Any closing thoughts? No, I thought it was fantastic. And please get the One Kind blog at onekindblog.com. But I enjoyed it. I learned a lot from you guys. Yeah.
Can we give a message to the audience?
Sure.
Embrace the idea of trade-offs, I think. If this would have helped in any way, I hope it did. But embrace the idea of trade-off, whichever side of the aisle you might be. It's not that scary.
Good. Okay,
Oh.
one of you,
I
ladies.
can say this. I think for me, at the end of the day, it's very important to have conversations. So think less of the outcome and more about the processes and the values that we all want to share. Yeah.
I think going back to our question just now, are we there yet? I think we're not there yet, but it's important to take care of each other as we get there. And we try to have civil discourse, but I also think, I guess the flip side is there might be angry people, but it's important to acknowledge their anger and to realize that usually anger probably denotes some kind of moral wrong done against them. And sometimes they are angry and they shout because they are not hurt, then they haven't been hurt for a long time. So I think part of getting to civil discourse is also to acknowledge that anger, and because it probably will gesture towards some wrong committed against them structurally or one-off. And being able to acknowledge that kind of pain, not to just dismiss people because they're shouting and they're angry, would be the step, I think, towards getting to civil discourse.
I think my one point is to sponge off the analogies that all of you have used about journeys and getting somewhere. I think the journey is probably the more important part, and I think it's who we journey with. Because actually, if you can build consensus, make friends, build a rapport as you embark on that journey, actually the destination doesn't matter so much as long as you do it together. And I think that is sometimes that part of me thinks that that's what Singapore is about. We don't really know, we are a small country, we don't know what 25 years will hold for us, 50 years. For a big country, America, Europe, they know that they will be around in 50, 100 years. We don't know that we will be there. So I think it's important for us to make the trip worth our while, bringing everyone on board and building that consensus even as we are journeying. It may be that we don't know exactly where we're going to end up yet, but half the battle I feel is won if we are able to build the consensus and rapport and camaraderie as we make that journey together. And I think that's what is unique about being Singaporean.
Excellent. And thank you very much for joining us on Momentum Tea. If you've liked the session, comment, like, share, and tune in again for the next episode of Momentum Tea, brought to you by Temasek Foundation. Thank you.